Hello everybody. Welcome to Vancouver UFO. Today's date is February 17th, 2024. My name is Jeff Selver, and I'm happy to be back. I've taken a little hiatus from public speaking to focus on a revised edition of my book, which is the focus of today's presentation. So this is The Rising and the Alien Plan to Build an Enlightened City on Earth, Rerelease. The new edition is available in both softcover and ebook at my website, www.jeffselver.com. I just want to mention this, we have right now 30 people here, so that's fantastic. And it's great to see you all. I'm very, very honored. In today's presentation, I have distinguished guest, author of The Dual Soul Connection, The Alien Agenda for Human Advancement, New Zealand UFO and Extraterrestrial Contact Researcher, experiencer, and board member of the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research, Suzy Hansen. Suzy was critical in helping me make the new edition of my book. So hi, Suzy.
Hi, Jeff, and good to see a good turnout.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so now we are in very interesting times indeed. And I consider it, and maybe you do also, the single greatest and most important time in human history. We are all learning about the phenomenon, and it is going to change all aspects of our lives. It's great to see the public's acceptance that something is going on, and it's thrilling to watch the public process of disclosure, especially when what is said publicly by officials in the process of disclosure corroborates things contactees have experienced with the extraterrestrials firsthand, which I'll get into. So in today's presentation, I'll first share how my story is holding up against disclosure, and there are some corroborating surprises that are worth talking about. I'll go into a description of the changes that I made to the new edition. And then me and Suzy will share fascinating connections and similarities between mine and her contact events, including experiences with technology, behaviors of the aliens, their telepathy, and their dimensionality, just to name a few. As well, we will share an interesting story how Suzy herself had an experience with the Elder in paranormal form, which is the main grain alien that I deal with. So, a picture is forming as the world is in the middle of soft disclosure. So how well is my story holding up in disclosure? I'm absolutely stunned. So much so that I bet this is the story. So the summary of my story is that I made an agreement with gray aliens to discover my soul. While doing so, they tell me their plans. The hybrids are being put on Earth, and there will be a city. But fundamentally, the phenomenon is all about consciousness, which is something that I proved to myself throughout the story. Now, the point with saying that I proved this to myself is that so many in the UFO abduction field assume the consciousness experiences that humans have on craft and report back to the researchers are all made up in the mind. That aliens produce holograms and imagery in the brain, which they do, but those are separate from the consciousness experiences contactees report. I heard one researcher brush off the consciousness expansion as they were sure it could all just be replicated through neurons in the brain. But what the aliens did with me proved without the shadow of a doubt their capability by providing consciousness experiences that interacted with my everyday life. They are in the afterrealm. They did interact with my consciousness, my soul, and they do have a big picture frame of reference that can encompass a contactee's past life and their purpose for manifesting in physical reality in this life. And humans have no frame of reference to understand these types of interactions, or so we assume. So at the Soul Foundation Symposium, first off, the Soul Foundation is a science and academic foundation dedicated to the research of unidentified aerial phenomenon led by Dr. Gary Nolan. Held a symposium at Stanford University last November that included a panel of scientific advisors such as Christopher Mellon and Jacques Vallée. So Jacques Vallée told a story about Bill Clinton's top science advisor, who at the time was advising Clinton to disclose. The advisor was giving a presentation in front of a bunch of high-ranking government people, and when asked about disclosure, told the audience the following story. A man is walking down the street, and he sees a bright light in the grass. Wondering what it is, he goes to it and finds a frog with a glowing green crown on it. He picks the frog up, and to his surprise, it starts talking to him. The frog explains she's a princess, and if he kisses her, she will turn into a beautiful young woman. She'll marry him, and they'll have children, beautiful children together. The man thinks for a minute and replies, "At my age, I'd rather have a talking frog," and puts her into his pocket. Now, the points, first off, I think this is a brilliant analogy that matches what I was told by the aliens. The points, the frog is a she. I'm certain the Greys are a matriarchal society. The frog is reminiscent of the extreme appearance of the Greys that are actually disturbing to the human eye. Surprised that it talks. They have a personalities. That's kind of the part of the contact events. They actually have personalities that are relatable and surprisingly relatable at that. They want to marry and have children. That's the hybrids. That's exactly the experience that I was told, bringing the two together and kind of a merging of societies, which is like marrying. And I love this last line here. I'm going to repeat this last line again. The man thinks for a minute and replies, "At my age, I'd rather have a talking frog," and puts her into his pocket. Now, I don't take the cabal stands. I've been very public about the kind of perspective I have about the whole, government part of all this. And I take the perspective that this whole picture is too large for humans. It's overwhelming, and humans don't know what to do with it. We have circumstantial evidence that more than once they brought in control groups who wanted to disclose, gave them all the information how it would change society, and they came out agreeing to not have disclosure. This created, and then the problems arise from there. It creates a vacuum, and then capitalism takes over, which is where we are now with David Grush going public with reverse engineering programs. I've always taken the stance that the picture is too large for humans, and in that way to have compassion. And even those who face it, who actually have or on the face of it, don't know what to do with it and struggle with it themselves. So this is a quote from John Mack Book's Abduction. With considerable resistance, Scott admitted that the intention of the aliens was to live here on Earth, but without us, unless humans change, in which case we might be able to live together. Then he contrasted the ways of humans with the aliens. Human beings are alone, and they don't share. In the alien realm, nobody's in their own world, and everybody knows everything. There are no secrets. So now that there's a public momentum around UAPs, people are digging up the things that were spoken of or written about in the past. And someone posted this onto Reddit, which is the first time I ever saw this. And this was my comment in response. "Wow, I didn't know this existed. They told me something very similar. I'm convinced this is what disclosure actually is. Aliens putting themselves on the Earth." So point number one, the aliens are planning on putting the hybrids on the planet and merging societies. So on the Neil Mitchell Asks Why podcast on September 25th, 2023, guest Ross Coulthert said, quote, "In reference to the UFO UAP phenomenon, it may also explain the other mystery in human life, which is what happens to us after we die, in reference to the UFO phenomenon." Now, the significance of Ross Coulthert is that he is the journalist who broke David Grush, the highest-ranking UAP whistleblower from the Department of Defense, who claimed the American government has a reverse engineering UAP program. So Ross Coulthert had to do background checks on his sources to even verify his credibility. So he interviewed people in the know, and this is what he says. So I actually have the video, and I'm going to play that piece here.
They call it the phenomenon because they think that what we're talking about is far more than just structured craft. Yes, it's biologics, but it may also explain the other mystery in human life, which is what happens to us after we die. Because a large part of what I'm investigating at the moment is that what we're talking about here may not in fact be a technology as we understand it, which might explain why we're having so much trouble reverse engineering it. It might in fact be a manifestation of some kind of uber consciousness that is essentially, or the theory goes, expressing itself through physical form to basically make humanity become aware. I mean, I know this sounds kooky, but I'm getting this from people in US intelligence who actually say to me, thank God somebody from mainstream media is taking this issue seriously.
This is so significant. It was right here on this channel, Vancouver UFO, July 5th, 2020, that I talked about my experiences of seeing the afterlife on an alien spacecraft. And now I have corroboration that that is even possible. One of the most unbelievable elements of my story has corroboration. UFO, and then there's another one as well too. So Leslie Kean is the journalist who broke the New York Times story that started this all back in 2017 with the Pentagon's 3 UAP videos. And she keeps doing her investigations, and this is what she says. UFO investigator who found US alien ship whistleblower says ghost dimension exists. Leading author Leslie Kean's work claims that a paranormal side of UFO reports connects to the ghosts and supernatural. So I have a video on my website, My Gray Alien Communicates Through Paranormal Activity. Besides having these memories of alien contact myself, and besides seeing the beings now as orbs and UAP that fly around my home, which I can video, the elder is a paranormal presence in my house. She displays poltergeist-like behavior that other people have witnessed, but it is always benevolent and not for the purpose of scaring, and with a purpose to communicate something specific. So point number 2, the phenomenon is all about consciousness. The being's technology and world prove the afterlife is real. Paranormal is real. Past lives are real. What we call God, the quantum unified field force, is real. And human existence is about self-realization, i.e., learning that you are God. So this is the big picture of what I'm pretty certain is going on here from all the information I received and and what I'm still learning about for the phenomenon. The grays and the controller species, whether they're called the mantis, in my book, they're called the leader, or it's called the leader. And there seems to be this kind of overarching species that they're taking the planet back. And it's not a threatening thing. It's more about nature. But I think the bottom line is that this image here, this is the age of the Earth. And it is huge, right? Humans, well, the death of the dinosaurs is right there. And humans are a tiny, tiny, tiny blip. So I think that this is the big point of it all. We now know that, it's obvious the aliens are here on Earth, and this is all real. So they are so advanced that they've been here the entire time without our knowing. Then the age of the planet says volumes in this picture. It's not hard to imagine with their quantum tech that they know how to erase their presence from our geological record, or even exist in phase cities that don't disturb the natural environment. The elder herself told me that they are stewards of the planet, humanity's agents of change. There might be some kind of management, role that the actual species plays with the planet, and then with us as well too. So the other summary, they're merging with our society. This is all about consciousness. And because this is all about consciousness, then it leaves humanity open to one very big fundamental problem. We don't know who we are. And we definitely don't know what we are. Because you're also an interdimensional being. And you don't know it. The challenge with disclosure is the assumed world view. If you're a physicalist, then you believe you're an evolved ape. If you're a spiritualist, then you believe you're a spirit. But likely, that's all you have is belief. And hopefully some experience that gives you confidence in the reality of spirit. But that's all humans can have. And it seems the aliens want to assist humans into this new paradigm. And it appears that is the purpose of books like mine and all those whose books open us up to this new paradigm, like Suzy Hansen's. Okay, so that was that section. That's kind of the midst of disclosure section. Now I'm going to talk a bit about the book and why I created a new book. So I considered the first edition of the book the cathartic journal. As a contactee, it's really hard to balance how personal alien contact can become versus trying to convince the public that something unbelievable happened to me. And the bottom line was I was uncomfortable with the first edition. So much so that I didn't really want people to read it. And that's really challenging because I also wanted people to know what happened to me. So it was kind of this weird balance I was kind of juggling with. And I am now much more comfortable with this book and this version of this book. It's been ironed out, and Suzy was significant in helping me with that. So what's in the new edition? I changed the title. I changed the title largely so people don't confuse The Rising with Dolores Cannon's concept of ascension. Though it seems some elements of that are actually relayed by the beings to me, The Rising was the experiment to discover my soul, and I wanted to make a distinction in the actual title change. The cover change, we wanted to lighten the mood of the book with a cover change, so that's kind of why we did that. I got a forward. I got actually very brilliant. I'm so grateful. Susan Manowich provided a brilliant forward for me. Very grateful. She's a contributing author to Beyond UFOs, the science of consciousness with consciousness in contact with non-human intelligence, the world's first comprehensive academic study of extraterrestrial contact. Suzy Hansen, very grateful, endorsed the book right in the front. There's a several page endorsement. I'm only absolutely grateful. It's very glowing. And yeah, I can't express my gratitude enough. So because it's all about consciousness, this story is about my own growth. It becomes challenging. And so I had these kind of, personal consciousness experiences with the beings. And the problem here is that ideas like psychic abilities, soul, visioning, God, at the human level, we're still questioning if these are real. And we imagine the aliens are like us, questioning reality, not knowing if the afterlife is real. Maybe they wonder if God is real. Maybe they have to spend years meditating to have a glimpse of expanded consciousness, just like us. And that's not where the beings are. We have to understand it's all real, and the being's ability extend from there. And again, we have no frame of reference for understanding this perspective. So that's why what makes this part of the book challenging is putting all that type of detail that I experienced in order. And so in this new edition, this part of the book was meant to be easier to move through. I have biological events just like everybody else who interacts with these entities. And the bottom line was to just make that more digestible for those who are reading it. I think that would be understandable. The city. So I wanted to give more detail about the city. I added a whole chapter to what I was given about this future city. And so here are 2 verses about the city that I witnessed. The beings will encourage a level of human to human, alien to human, mind and heart, telepathic transparency, much like I experienced in the White Room, where as an exposed energy, there was no holding back, and there were no inhibitions. All humans want is to love and be loved, and a communal, open-hearted, love for everyone, rave-like celebration will be encouraged, such as I experienced in the White Room. There are no laws in this new society, like those which govern the human world, as their technology affords all information to all, seeing any space and any moment in time. Crimes and corruption are impossible. All that exists is ignorance of cause and effect, which is handled by creating a structure for growth as opposed to jail time. And that quote from John Mack's Abductions in the beginning of the presentation from the contactee Scott is so similar to this last paragraph. And that's just a corroboration again. It's not, I didn't know that I had written this. Actually, the book had already been released when I saw that Reddit post. So that's just, again, the way the aliens communicate always seems to have a kind of similar vein between contactees. And so I created an addendum in the book called The Teachings of a Vedic Guru That Matched the Experience of an Alien Dimensional Room, which is like a consciousness summary. And it is because right now, everyone in the field is looking towards scientists to understand the phenomenon. But the problem with that is science is rooted in objective reality. Yet the phenomenon interacts with consciousness, and consciousness is subjective by nature, not objective. And the phenomenon seems to also interact with the subjective nature of reality, with the simulation theory, and with quantum reality. So eventually, the ones who will be able to help us understand the phenomenon most are those spiritual masters, those traditions that which elevated spiritual mastery, such as the Vedic yogis and gurus. And this is because consciousness isn't in the intellect. Consciousness is beyond the mind. And so eventually we will need those teachings from those who mastered the mind to go beyond and experience the realm of the phenomenon. Another amazing feature of the book is Thomas Hansen, Suzy Hansen's husband, committed to provide art for the book. Again, eternally grateful. I cannot express enough gratitude for how amazing, the experience was to make that happen, and then for Thomas to kind of provide results. So this is so it was actually really fun. Thomas and Suzy met with me, and they really highlighted, the emotional centers of the book. And so the agreement I made with the Gray Aliens in the very first contact event when I was 16, it was really fun. Thomas actually wanted pictures of what I looked like at the time, and so this was a nice replication of the hair I had, and I wore a hat, and I definitely was wearing a hat and looked that way in the contact event. And for me, it's kind of a flashback. I actually feel the contact event, and so yeah. And this is the elder pointing at the holographic timeline. So very grateful. He drew the city on Venus, and I just thought that was really wild. And he got a lot of micro detail, like the glass ceiling that I had witnessed as well too, and how the buildings themselves were not the kind of normal shapes that humans have, not kind of the hard edges, but kind of more curved, rounded, and kind of weird oblong shapes. And another very powerful point of the book is my interaction with the twins. And basically where I learned that they are making hybrids, and they call them the new humans, actually. And they were kind of ready to go hybrids in these kind of tubes. And it's just really wild that happened. And I was in shock actually in the moment. And you can see me there kind of caught off guard and kind of freaked out a little bit actually. And Thomas did a really good job at kind of capturing the motion while being explained by the very calm and relaxed twin telling me about the new humans. I have when I'm not an artist, so when I capture my own what I experienced as best as I possibly could through my own art, I love it. So I love this kind of picture I made of the elder, and it also still is in the book. I had a friend reading the book, and he said to me, "Where is this going?" Because I guess, it's 26 contact events, and it's a bit confusing when it just kind of happens one after the other. So I actually made a legend that described, of course, when I saw the holographic timeline, I didn't see the little orbs inside of it, but they were throughout. This is what I understand. This is the placement of where the contact events were exactly in the holographic timeline. Because eventually I was explained by the elder that that the holographic timeline, each cuboid represented 3 years. So it was actually able to understand where those contacts would be in reference to that. I got better at describing the leader. This is not, again, 100% perfect because I'm not an artist. The snout probably would have been a little bit larger, but relatively, this kind of gives me a flashback of the experiencing the leader, the kind of what people call the mantis, and this is kind of what the entity looked like for me. So it didn't look like a mantis, right? It kind of looks. I've always said it looked like an aardvark, the way it kind of held its hands, but had a snout, kind of horse-like, dinosaur-like snout. And then kind of these cat eyes. Yeah. And then lastly, I made changes to the website as I'm just trying to give more information. I give a lot of my information away. And I've gotten better at, there's more science behind the memory content about me gaining these memories, because that's the part of my story, right? Like I woke up midlife to these memories, and I'm always trying to be as transparent about what happened to me as absolutely possible. And so I just put it all up front, and there's a whole the science of accurate memory recalls on my side, basically essay, but it's from the intro of the book. And so you can just, your critical mind, you can have that information yourself, and you can see how I went through the effort to prove to myself the highly cooperative details that I get from these memories. And I also put the Mystic book online because it was in the old book, and I just want to give it away. Basically, the aliens, I can get that telepathy from them, and they want that. They want the book to just be kind of given away. And so I made it as accessible as possible for people. And so there's a whole bunch of detail I can actually put onto the website by having the ability to have it online for free. Then I'm able to kind of give as much description as I can about the book. And so that's available for people as well too. So before we get into the Suzy section, please leave Amazon reviews. I don't, on my YouTube channel, I don't ask you to subscribe. I don't ask you to like, and I don't ask you to, hit the notification bell. But one of the most valuable things for me is Amazon reviews. People actually email me a lot that, they loved the book, or they loved this experience, or they had a great revelation from something. And I'm very shy about asking for the reviews. And so I'm just kind of punching it right here. Please leave Amazon reviews. They're very, very, very valuable for me. And so if you enjoyed the book, if you got anything out of it, please let the public know. And that's one of the most valuable things that can happen for me, is you leaving an Amazon review. Okay. So I'm going to tell a bit of a story here. So one of the many hard to swallow parts of my experience, and there are several, I'm aware of that, is that I continue to have telepathy with the elder. She is a real presence in my life now and displays herself in paranormal fashion. Actually, she's probably listening. And now, fascinatingly, others have experienced her as well. Suzy is one of them, and I'll get to that in a second. It's actually fascinating to talk about that 3 people have had firsthand experience with the elder in paranormal form. All 3 of those people had gray alien contact. All 3 considered themselves to have gray alien genetics, and all 3 had mediumship abilities. So that's just very fascinating. The first, I'm going to tell the details of the story here. The first was someone at a CE5, and this was in the early days of me speaking publicly. I met another contactee, and then we met for lunch outside of the group. And upon going to meet them, I could feel the elder herself was inquisitive. Like, who is this person? Who is this? Who's Jeff meeting? And she kind of had this inquisitiveness about it. And in those early days, they were sensitive to who I was interacting with, and the idea that they didn't want me to have outside influence. As I say that I was not an aliens and UFO guy on my website, that was something that they liked, that I didn't come to the memories with preconceived ideas. So when I arrived for lunch, we eventually got into great conversations, and he was a very, very professional person. Actually, he worked for the United Nations, and he turned out to be a very powerful medium, a highly sensitive medium, who, part of his side job was to help others and help others heal through, other people who have passed on who were important to them. And kind of closer to the end of the conversation, I mentioned that I had a guru. I have a guru, and he says, "Oh, is your guru a female?" I said, "No, it's not." And he said, "Oh, well, I could feel a female spirit presence inquiring who I was, like suspicious about me, before we met." And at the time, I was like, "Oh yeah, that's the elder," and I kind of just thought of it as an interesting kind of side joke, and didn't really think about it too much. But it was kind of just one of the first moments that someone else had experienced her. The second was a contactee that we featured here on Vancouver UFO. And in a private conversation, me and this contactee and the elder had a 3-way conversation. I heard a communication with the elder. Then she had a communication, the contactee, with the elder. Then the elder told me about the communication, and then the contactee told me about the communication. And then since at that point, that contactee was sensitive to specific moments in my life when I was interacting with the elder. Like, she could pick up on it, and all of a sudden I would receive a text. I would never talk to that contactee for months, and she would literally just send a text saying, "Listen to your elder." And it was just really random, and it would be very, very specific about moments I was going through with something that I might have been aware of with communication-wise. So me and Suzy had an experience as well too. And it goes like this. So as the first edition of the book was being published, right before the cover was being completed, one night I had a very strong telepathic communication from the elder, from both the elder and the leader. Now, even crazier, right? I have it from both of them, from that kind of mantis entity, and then also from the elder herself. And that night, they kind of both were there, very strong, and they told me to write down a passage, and it goes like this: It's not to dominate you, it's to change to societal structures that benefit you, and to change to societal structures that benefit nature. There are ways that are very advanced for society to coexist, but they are reorientations of your sense of self because they involve consciousness technology. And then they kind of said, they were actually really emphatic, put that on the back of the book. So that's the origin of this line, which is now graces both the back of the front edition, the first edition, and the second edition. And it sticks out in a weird way in the book. I kind of just say it offhandedly that I was told this. And I mentioned it in the chapter about my 25th contact event in the first book. And I didn't really know what to do with this line. Though it was very impactful, it was not from a contact event. So it kind of just sat on its own in this kind of weird way. Well, one day I was putting together the last chapter of the new edition, the chapter on the city, and I had these collections of paragraphs that me and Suzy were going through over Zoom, one by one, and I was reading them out while Suzy saw them on her screen. By the way, Suzy had absolutely no background knowledge about this unique line that comes from the book. And when we approached this line, I began reading it out loud, and then something happened. Suzy, do you want to explain that part?
Yes, we'd been puzzling over the inclusion of certain paragraphs, etc., and the sense that they could be expressed in. And when Jeff read that out, I saw this distinct little ball of light, probably about 1.5 centimeters in diameter, and it just came zooming in on my left. It came right in my line of vision, passed across my screen and disappeared. And it didn't do that in a flash. It kind of took its time. And while it was taking its time, I was receiving this little stream of information and feelings and emotions, which I described to Jeff. And I said to him, I think this is the elder. And he said, yes, he agreed. And I was able to actually state to him the way she felt about him, the way she viewed him, her affection for him, etc. And those were all things that he recognized and identified with. And so it really confirmed to us that that this was a very important paragraph, and perhaps as things unfold in disclosure and in the contact arena, that this will become more and more of an important statement to quell a lot of fears and the idea of a threat to humanity.
Great. That's great, Suzy. Thank you. Yeah, it was just one of those magical moments, and yeah, it just the contact, the phenomenon is magical, and it's very beautiful when it's interacting with us.